L'chaim, l'chaim. So when the great Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov saw misfortune threatening the Jews, it was his custom to go to a certain part in the forest, and he would meditate, and he would light a fire, and he would say a special prayer, and the miracle would be accomplished, and the misfortune averted. Later, when his disciple, the Maggid of Mezerich, had occasion for the same reason to intercede with heaven, he would go to the same place in the forest and say, Master of the universe, listen, I don't know how to light the fire, but I'm still able to say the prayer. And again, the miracle would be accomplished. Still later, Rabbi Moshe Leib of Sasav, in order to save his people once more, would go into the forest and say, I don't know how to light the fire, I do not know the prayer, but I know the place, and this should be sufficient. And it was sufficient, and the miracle was accomplished. Then it fell to Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin to overcome misfortune. And sitting in his armchair, his head in his hands, he spoke to God. He said, I am unable to light the fire. I do not know the prayer. I cannot even find the place in the forest. All I can do is tell the story. And this must be sufficient. And it was sufficient. And this Eli Wiesel wrote in an introduction to one of his books and concluded, God made man because he loves stories. I can't promise any overt miracles tonight, but stories we will definitely hear. Stories of the miracle of the human spirit, of perseverance, stories of lightness and humor and love of life. So I want to thank our storytellers tonight for their courage and yes, their vulnerability in sharing a piece of themselves and of their family and of their stories with us tonight. We will be hearing from 8 wonderful members of the Jewish community here in Plano. Each story will be about 6 minutes, and there's a little timer for the speakers on the bottom left, which we just were able to get thanks to Shalom. So I want to thank the speakers, and I want to thank you, the audience and the community, for your presence and your attention. And finally, we would like to thank and acknowledge the Jimmy Shea Jewish Scholarship and Culture Series, which provided the funding to underwrite this event this evening. The generosity of the Shea family makes it possible for Chabad of Plano to stage 2 unique educational experiences annually, and we'll share some details about the following event at the end of the evening. For now, let's turn our attention to our first tale of the tribe. Mark Elfenbein is a father of 2 boys, grandfather of 2 grandchildren. Originally from Houston, Mark is in real estate, but you can still hear him every Sunday on the ticket from 7 to 9 a.m., which is really the most optimistic time of the day for a Cowboys fan these days, before the game begins. When I asked Mark what he would be sharing, he said, a very recent, sad, yet amazing story about my best friend Matzah and my new best friend Shea. That's all I know about the story. So I can't wait to hear the rest of it together with you. The title of his story is Taste the Soup. So please join me in welcoming Mark Elfenbein to the stage.
Oh, wow, spotlight. Okay, clock is running. I guess I could start. So my story starts with my love for dogs. And my dog, Allie, unfortunately passed away about 5 years ago, and I was beside myself. I didn't know what to do. I literally would go see dogs in places and pet them every day until I called a lab rescue place, and I'm telling the lady on the phone, I lost my dog. She goes, oh my God, I lost my yellow lab as well. I said, I'm absolutely destroyed by this. She says, I own this company, but I'm going to call this place, and I want you to get off the phone and go to the website. It's called Allie's Haven. My dog's name was Allie. I went, whoa. She goes, go to the page 2. There's a dog by the name of Sugar. Pay the $50, get the dog. It's the greatest dog I've ever seen in my life. She's been in the business for 25 years. I did. I knew I was going to name the dog Matzah. Kugel was taken. I would say chutzpah, but it was a girl dog, so I couldn't do that. So I got Matzah. And matzah was the greatest thing to ever happen to me in my life, besides family and kids and all that stuff. My best friend. Unfortunately, 2-3 weeks ago, I saw matzah was not doing well. I could tell. I took her to the vet. They said, let's give her antibiotics medicine. I know my dog. My son, 2 weeks ago, before I'm on the air on a Sunday morning at 7, I text him, Landon, something's wrong with matzah. He says, let me pick her up. I'll take her to my vet. Let's get a second opinion. I said, okay. I meet him at the place. The doctor comes out and tells us, Mr. Elfenbein, she's got complete kidney failure. She has a week. I cry. My son's crying. I can't believe what he's telling me. I said, you can't do that to me. He says, I don't know what to tell you. He says, you can do it today or you can do it this week. And I look at my son as he's crying. He says, take her home for one night, just the two of you, and bring her back tomorrow. So I did. In the meantime, I was miserable, and I immediately called DFW Lab Rescue in Alley's Haven again to let them know what happened to my beloved Matzah. I need another dog. I need another friend. I need another best friend now. So they immediately, they're crying. They can't believe what happened. They all loved Matzah. And I get a call from them. They said, we got a couple of pictures of a couple dogs. They sent it to me. I said, I'm in. Tell me what I need to do. Pay the $50. Pay the $50. I'm home the next night talking to my friend, and the phone rings. And you know, today you just pick up the phone. Hello? May I speak to Mark, please? I said, this is he. Hi, Mark. This is Nancy and Chuck Smith. Hi. She goes, don't remember us? And I said, I do not. We're the people that you got matzah from. I went, oh my God. And she starts crying on the phone with her husband. We are so sad to hear what happened. We're brokenhearted. We're talking for 5 minutes. And at the end of the conversation, I said, that is so sweet of you to reach out and call me. I said, thank you so very much. She goes, that's not the only reason we're calling. The picture they sent you today is the dog that we have. Can we come over tomorrow to bring you your new dog? I said, you got to be kidding me. This is full circle. You gave me my first one, and now, somehow, some way, the dots are connecting. And the next night they came over, and this was a little bit more of a yellow lab puppy. And immediately I'm getting bombarded with names. And I'm thinking, Klugel, no. This, Bagel, no. And I thought, what did your mom and your grandmother used to say? Shayna Punham, hey. Pretty face. So Shayna is my new yellow lab. And when they brought her over, you don't know if it's going to work out. She comes in my house. She's running around. I'm like, don't piss anywhere. Don't do anything yet. I don't know you. And she says, and she looks outside. She goes, oh, you have a pool? I said, yes. She goes, the dog loves to swim. I said, Matzah never swam. The only yellow lab I ever had that never got in the pool. And I opened the back, well, let's go outside. And that dog took one flying leap into my pool. And she goes, it's going to work. And I said, it's going to work. So we all know the man above does some really amazing things. I thought my life was over when I lost my best friend, Matzah. But I got a new best friend in Shayna. And Mr. Elfenbein is very happy.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Sharona Ohayon was born and raised in New York, where she earned a master's in art history and museum management. She worked at the Guggenheim Museum and sat on the board of the Holocaust Museum in NYC. But today, for the last decade plus, Sharona has been happily raising her 3 daughters with her husband, Jesse. Sharona's story, reflecting on a powerful account of her family history, is titled A Son's Promise. Let's welcome Sharona to the stage.
I think we take a lot of things for granted in this country. Kosher cheese, for example. Today, it's unremarkable that we can Instacart any kosher cheese to our door in minutes. Let me tell you a story of a boy named Leo, born in 1916, who would escape Nazi Germany and build a multi-million-dollar business from nothing. This business, to a large degree, is why we have kosher cheese at our fingertips today. And that boy, Leo Thurm, was my extraordinary grandfather. The company he built was Miller's Cheese, which was World Cheese, which owns iconic brands like Miller's, Migdal, and Ha'olam. His journey to building this industry-changing business is nothing short of awe-inspiring. Leo's life began in Cologne, Germany, but he spent his early years in Schweden, Holland, where many Dutch and German Jews sought refuge from World War I. There, his parents opened a dairy store, planting the seeds of Leo's connection to this industry. In 1921, the family returned to Germany, where Leo attended Cheder, then university, to pursue a business degree. But life changed in 1933. On what was known as Boycott Shabbos, Leo's classmates in Nazi uniforms showed up at his door. Luckily, Leo wasn't home, and a compassionate teacher warned him that the school couldn't protect him and he should leave the country. So at only 17, he did. Before his father sent him away, he gave Leo a small pair of tefillin and made him promise 3 things: keep Shabbos, keep kosher, and wear tefillin every day. Leo was smuggled out of Germany to Holland and arrived in America by 1935. He worked at Capital Dairy, but couldn't keep Shabbos, and despite the risk, he quit. Soon after, he found work that allowed him to keep his promises, and a few years later, he was able to bring the rest of the family to America. They brought with them a few hundred cases of Dutch cheese, which Leo and his father began selling from a pushcart in New York City's bustling Lower East Side. In 1937, they established the first kosher cheese company in America. In a tiny office with 1 desk and 1 refrigerator, they named it World Cheese. What chutzpah, and perhaps belief in themselves and faith in God to name their tiny business World Cheese. In 1942, Leo was drafted to the U.S. Army and served in campaigns across North Africa, Italy, and France. He was shipped out the day before Passover. In a short memoir, he wrote, "Sunday we boarded a British passenger ship, usually for 800 people, but 7,500 soldiers were loaded on it. All partitions had been removed, hammocks strung from the ceiling, tables and benches were on the floor, on which we slept at nights. This Monday was Erev Pesach, the evening of Passover, and although the Jewish Welfare Board had promised there would be matzahs and wine, nothing was there. Luckily, myself and 2 friends had brought along some matzah, and sitting on a hammock from the ceiling, we read the Haggadah with tears in our eyes, celebrating the first Seder." Throughout his service, Leo kept the promises made to his father, putting on tefillin as often as possible and doing his utmost to keep kosher. After the war, Leo poured his energy into building World Cheese, all the while relentlessly upholding kosher standards. For years, kosher animals-derived rennet, an enzyme essential in cheesemaking, had to be imported from Israel, as the U.S. rennet was not kosher. This made U.S. kosher cheese cost prohibitive to many. In the 1970s, a new innovation, wheat-based rennet, allowed World Cheese products to be solely made in the U.S., drastically lowering costs. However, every year during Passover, when wheat-based products were prohibited, rennet from Israel was once again imported, raising prices. When a kosher, non-wheat, seaweed-based rennet was introduced, Leo immediately switched over to it permanently, putting a stop to the constant back and forth. This story is why most of the cheese you buy today reads kosher for Passover on the packaging, no matter what time of year you buy it. In the late 1990s, a kashrut crisis caused a week-long halt in all kosher milk and cheese production across the United States. A little background. Sometimes a cow's stomach twists, requiring a simple surgery to fix it. For over 100 years, rabbis universally deemed these cows to be kosher. But when a well-renowned rabbi ruled that we should be more strict and not use these blemished cows, the kosher dairy industry came to a screeching halt, since nearly all U.S. herds had these cows in them, and their milk could not be separated from the rest. While some suggested ignoring this new ruling, Leo refused, saying, "If it is a question of kashrut, we do not compromise, and if that means shutting down the business, then so be it." Over the next few days, Leo paid all his farmers to remove these cows from their herd, an expensive but necessary step. Other companies followed suit, restoring U.S. kosher dairy production. This practice continues till today, ensuring kosher milk accepted by all. Leo's remarkable life was filled with quiet and powerful acts of dedication. He lived with unwavering commitment to his family, to the Jewish community, and to those 3 promises made back in Germany. Even at 101, Leo continued to go to World Cheese, not for work, but to greet each and every employee. One day, he was found at his desk cutting little pieces of paper that read meat or dairy, worried he could no longer keep his dishes separate at home like he used to. When he left the office each night, people would say, "Leo, we wish you a night of besurot tovot, of only good things," to which he would always reply, "For Klal Yisrael, for all the Jewish people." My grandfather Leo passed away in 2018 on Rosh Hashanah morning at the age of 102. He was once asked, "To what do you attribute your arichat yamim, your long life?" At first, he answered, "I really don't know." But when pressed, he said, "If you're going to force me to answer, I would tell you that it's that I gave it my utmost. I did my all to live and uphold the Masorah, the legacy of my father." So maybe the next time you're in a store or in your kitchen and you pick up a piece of Miller's cheese, you'll remember some of this story and recognize that you'll hold in your hand a century-long promise of a son to his father.
Thank you, Sharona. That was beautiful and illuminating. Our next speaker, Aaron Machbitz, is a former Division I baseball player and professional wrestler, turned podcaster, speaker, and coach. I am fortunate to have spent a very enjoyable hour on his podcast, Something for Everybody is the name. Check it out on all platforms. Discussing some foundational ideas of Judaism. And Aaron's audience is, I think, mostly not Jewish, and his consistent use of his platform to promote education about Judaism, and especially the state of Israel in recent times, has definitely earned my admiration. And Aaron also deserves a mazel tov for his recent marriage to Rihanna, here with us tonight. But Aaron has prepared a deeply personal story titled After Darkness. So let's welcome Aaron to the storytelling stage.
Does it start? There we go. Well, hello. My name is Aaron Machbitz, and I want to tell you about the worst day of my life. But before I get to that, I'll backtrack a little bit just to give some context and some backstory about my life and who I am. I won't go back too far, only go back to about 2016. That's when I officially became a professional wrestler. And if you don't know what professional wrestling is, think like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin. My professional wrestling name was Jackson Stone, and I really urge you to not Google that right now, because you will see me in my underwear, and very shiny, and some long blonde hair, and that's not the light I want you to see me in once I get to my story, but if you want a good laugh, then you can Google it later. But the reason I became a professional wrestler was when I was 13, I fell in love with it. Growing up, I really loved sports and superheroes, and when I saw WWE on the television, I was like, holy cow, these guys are massive, their arms are bigger than my head, they jump around everywhere, and so it was sort of the culmination of everything that I thought was really cool, which was sports and superheroes. So in that moment, I went downstairs, I told my parents, I said, I'm either going to be a professional baseball player or a professional wrestler. And God willing, I was able to pursue both of those paths to a really far end. So I'm very fortunate about that. And so then 2016, I graduated college. I became a professional wrestler. I came up with the name Jackson Stone. I know what you're thinking, wow, super cool name. Yes, super cool. Longer story about how I came up with that. We can maybe tell you about that later. But anyways, so I started traveling the world, traveling the United States as Jackson Stone. It was my full-time job at that point, which was really cool. And then we go to 2018. I had moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to pursue my wrestling career even further. The scene over there was just a little bit more dense and there was more things to do, and I could easily travel to Europe just a little bit better because I was out there quite a bit. And it was just sort of a random like Tuesday afternoon or whatever day it was. I was at the Jersey Shore with my then girlfriend. Don't worry, I hadn't met my wife at this point. And I got a phone call from a phone number that I didn't have saved in my phone, and I reluctantly answered the call. And after about 5 minutes of trying to figure out who this person was, I realized that I actually knew them quite well, and they had just got back from a trip with my parents during Labor Day, September of 2018. And eventually, we got to the point where this gentleman, his name was Henry, told me that my sister had just ended her own life. And when my parents got back from this trip, they had found my sister in the room that she grew up in, across the hall from where I grew up in. And when something like that happens, maybe people in this room have gone through something catastrophic where your whole life changes in an absolute instant. Everything changes. Your perspective changes, who you think about, who you want to be. You know, it comes with time and some effort and some action, but my life took a totally different direction than I thought I was going to be a professional wrestler for the rest of my life. This was in 2018. It's been 6 years since I lost my sister, and now all I do basically is talk about her. And the reason why it's so important is because then I wasn't living with any sort of moral compass. Yes, I was pursuing my dream, and that's cool, and everyone should pursue their dream, but there was no set of standard that I was living by. There was no intentionality with my life about how I wanted to treat people and who I wanted to become. And the reason why my sister is so important to me was because, one, she supported every endeavor that I ever did. She recorded my very first professional wrestling match, which happens to be on YouTube. It's pretty cool. You should watch it. But she embodied the values that I always wanted to embody. And I didn't ever learn those lessons until she passed away. My sister represented a person who was kind and empathetic and open-hearted and not judgmental. And I was very much all of those things. I was super judgmental, and I thought people were less than. And that was just, not for any sort of reason. That's just, the sort of the sport, jock, athlete culture. You sort of have to play with the sort of bravado and confidence, and it's good on the field, but potentially off the field, it's a little bit damaging. And so over the last 6 years, I've transformed basically who I was based on this very moment. And I think pain is really the only motivator for change because it just catalyzes who we think we can be. And so I encourage you, if you're thinking about making a change or you want to do something with your life that you feel like in your gut, don't wait for that moment, that catastrophic moment. Try now, take little steps forward. Because the most important thing that I have learned over the last 6 years that may sound extremely cheesy or something that you might see on a social media thing or on a billboard, or it's like an empty platitude, but literally the most important thing is that each one of us matters very deeply and that the world needs you here. The world needs everything that you have to offer, from your insecurities to your mistakes, all the way to your successes, because the whole fabric of the universe would absolutely change if you weren't the person you were meant to be. And so that's what I learned from my sister, and that's the message that I try to carry with me every single day to try and carry on what she believed in and now what I believe to be true. So thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Andrea Parker is the mother of 2 boys and the founder of the Big Heart Candle Company, a business dedicated to supporting heart disease research through donations to the American Heart Association. And her story, which reflects on this experience, is titled "The Beat Goes On." Andrea, the mic is all yours.
Every November, and in honor of my dad, I reread Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. My father introduced me to the book when I was in college, and I refer to it quite often during challenging times. I wonder what it means that I'm speaking to you today, on the day of my father's yahrzeit. Bear with me as I share how I've come to understand meaning in life. The second Tuesday in June 2009 was a dark and stormy day. In fact, much of Plano was without power. No, I can move.
Yeah, it works.
And it was my birthday. Though not feeling well, it was kind of easy to write it off as a tired mom of active young kids syndrome. And at the same time, more years than not, I suffered from bronchitis or pneumonia or both. It just was kind of a part of my life. So I kind of just braced for another round of illness. 3 days later, because of a very supportive husband, I went to the doctor. I was feeling pretty awful. There's just no way to sugarcoat it. I left with a shot of antibiotics in my hip and another round of steroids. It just felt like another spring. What was not usual is that the next day I felt worse, and again with Jason's push. This time I headed to the emergency room. We had 2 young kids at home, so I headed there in an ambulance. Late that Saturday evening, the emergency room doctor told me that my heart had ballooned to the size of a basketball and I was in late-stage congestive heart failure. I was 38 years old. 3 months later and 2 days before our youngest turned 6, my first defibrillator was implanted, and we learned that my heart function had dropped since that first trip to the emergency room. But without skipping the beat, and 2 days later, I was in that kindergarten classroom, very happily enjoying Oreos and celebrating my son's 6th birthday. So let's fast forward 8 years later, because the rest is, not great. With a heart that had improved, and still with impaired function, 2 teenagers, the same wonderfully supportive husband. Taking medications that I both despised because of the side effects and appreciated because that's what helped me be able to keep my original heart. I decided there had to be a way I could turn this literal heartache into something good. So of course I started a candle business. Not only do I make and sell candles to raise money for the Heart Association, but also I share my story with anyone who will listen. So thank you for listening. And especially women. Because women continue to be underdiagnosed, undertreated, and quite frankly, underheard when it comes to cardiovascular disease. If you think something is wrong, please get it checked. I remind you, I was 38 years old, and congestive heart failure doesn't usually just happen quite that severely overnight. Sorry. Oh, no, not a big time public speaker here. Let me give you a little backstory. Childbirth was not exactly smooth sailing for me. When my babies were wheeled into the nursery, I was wheeled in the ICU. I had central lines in my foot and in my neck, and I was receiving massive blood and plasma transfusions. So when I was diagnosed with idiopathic heart disease 6 years later and was told that a virus attacked my heart, I saw little reason to question it. Now let's fast forward to the good part. Late 2023, I've spent years reading voraciously about cardiomyopathy, which is an enlarged heart, and I had obviously a very personal vested interest and I have donated over $20,000 to the American Heart Association through candle sales. Thank you. I also have, at that point, this was the fall of 2023, approximately 6 months of a brand new medication under my belt. I felt healthier and stronger than I could ever remember. No bronchitis, no pneumonia. Did you know that the American Heart Association is one of the largest NGOs that contributes to cardiovascular health research? I had found my meaning. So let me tell you about these boys who I love so very much with my very oversized heart. During fall of 2023, at my regular twice-a-year appointment with my cardiologist, who now refers to me as a boring patient, I asked him about a recent NIH study that I had read about genetic cardiomyopathy. I was either well-read enough or very convincing, and my doc agreed to see my kids during their college winter breaks and to request genetic blood tests, if for no other reason than he was just so tired of hearing it from me. By January of 2024, both of my boys were diagnosed with heart failure. Not such a boring patient anymore, am I? At the end of their break, we sent our kids back to their college lives knowing they were in the 90-day waiting period, each of them, and we would see whether they needed a defibrillator or not. But guess what? Remember that new med I started taking? Remember that the American Heart Association is a huge research, raises a lot of money for research. Our kids started those meds. Their hearts recovered as much in 90 days as mine did in 14 years. And we discovered that we all have the same genetic marker for cardiomyopathy. Viktor Frankl posits that we can find meaning through work, the courage to endure suffering, and in our love for others. And in summary, I 100% agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. That was very moving. Our next speaker comes to us from Brooklyn. This is Bernie Feiwus, born there in 1948, built a successful career in finance and retail, holding senior roles at Citicorp and Neiman Marcus and JCPenney. But now Bernie's focused on family and Jewish learning and spirituality. He's an active member here, a supporter of Chabad Plano, and enjoys reading, sports, Micah's football games, and video games with Micah too. Bernie's story takes us back to the heady days of Neiman Marcus and is titled Fantastic Gifts and Where to Find Them. Let's welcome Bernie Feiwus.
Thank you. In my 45-year-plus business career, the most interesting position I had was as president and CEO of Neiman Marcus Direct, which were the catalog divisions of Neiman, Swatchow, Trifolds, Grand Finale, Bergdorf, Chef's Catalog. To give you an idea, we would publish over 80 unique catalogs a year, 140 million circulation, but there was only one catalog a year that was really noteworthy, and that was the Neiman Marcus Xmas book with the fantasy gifts. So for 8 years, a Jewish boy from Brooklyn was responsible for the fantasy gifts in the Neiman Marcus Xmas book. And there's a tremendous amount of interest in it. Neiman's never did it with the idea of selling a lot of them or making a lot of money off these particular products. But each year we would dedicate 8 to 10 pages in this catalog to unusual gifts. And it was really an interesting process we went through. There would be thousands of people writing us with gifts, and there would be thousands of gifts that were recommended to us that made no sense at all. But what I'd like to talk to you about is a few specific years where I was involved in some gifts, and the idea was to see something in one context that would never be in a catalog and reshape it so that it was in a catalog. So during the Iraq War in 1990-91, watching Desert Storm on TV like all of us did, I saw that the Army wasn't using Jeeps anymore. They were using something called Humvees. Now, back then, pre-internet, it wasn't easy to research stuff, so it took us a couple days to track down that these Humvees were made by a company called AM General out of South Bend, Indiana, which had taken over an old Studebaker car plant. Some of you may remember the name Studebaker. So I went up to South Bend, and they had been considering making a civilian version. And we came out with the first civilian version of the Hummer. And we actually sold 8 or 10 of them. Now, we did put leather in, we did put air conditioning in, we put all kinds of safety features in, which obviously weren't in the military vehicle. That's one way to look at one thing and see something else. A couple of years later, 1993, if I'm not mistaken, I'm with my son watching the first Jurassic Park movie. And I said, I bet you we could sell dinosaurs. These were animated, they would move a little bit and make noises and snort smoke out and things like that. And about a week later, we found that they were manufactured in a place in San Diego. So we put 2 in the book, a baby T-Rex for $63,000 and a Triceratops for $93,000. Not expecting to sell any. Well, we sold one. We sold a baby T-Rex to a Mid-Eastern country for their embassy in Washington, D.C. So, and they wanted it there for an event in the middle of December. So we put it on a truck, or we didn't put it on a truck, but it was put on a truck in San Diego, and we'd get a phone call each night telling us where the truck had been on its way to San Diego. And about 3 days before delivery day, there was a huge storm in Tennessee, and the truck couldn't go through. So the next thing I knew, we were on the phone with the embassy in Washington, D.C., explaining the situation. They said, no problem at all. We're having another event 3 days later in Aspen, Colorado. Truck turns around, heads to Aspen, Colorado. We're in Aspen, Colorado. Well, we won't tell you for security reasons, but what you'll do is go to this truck stop over here off of Interstate 70, and we will have a tractor waiting there. Your tractor could drop the trailer with the dinosaur off, and our tractor will pull up, take it, and away they goes. Again, looking for something in one context, finding it and using it in another context. That same year, we had an electric car, silly us, 1993, in the catalog called Electric Car GTP. It was supposed to be able to go 25 to 30 miles in between charges. So we put it in the catalog. We sold one. But the manufacturer called us and we're having some problems with the length of the charge. Next thing I knew, I was out in LA, and the car did manage to go a little over a mile before running out of charge, and I got stuck in it in the street in LA. Fortunately, not in rush hour. The interesting part about these things is that you could see things beyond what you would normally expect. Now, how does this relate to me and Chabad? I was brought up non-Orthodox in Brooklyn. I left for a short period of time, about 40 years, and magically 40 years later, I found Chabad of Plano. And I found my spirituality. And they found in me someone that loved Chabad, loved its teaching, loved its learning. And it was a perfect match, and we've been that way ever since.
Thank you, Bernie. That's just in time for the holiday season. If you're looking to get a gift for somebody very, 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 very special. Zina Krivoruk is a mother of 2 and a psychotherapist who works with those interested in their own evolution and being of service to their communities. I know Zina has been wavering between a couple stories, and each one sounded intriguing, so either way, we're in for a treat. But the title for Zina's story tonight is A Little Piece of the Dead Sea. So let's give a warm welcome to Zina.
I'm following instructions in my head right now. I remember this. Okay. All right, can everybody hear me? Okay. Yep, I'm the person that couldn't make up her mind because there's too many stories to tell, and I couldn't find any kind of point to the stories, but there's so many fun ideas, and I really honor the space that Rifki and Rabbi Block create, so I wanted to do something a little bit special. My story that I'd like to share with you all is called A Little Piece of the Dead Sea. It's about a time when I really hit a wall. I was an English teacher working in Vancouver, Washington, and it was a community college. I was really pouring all my energy into my students, and I poured so much energy into them that I had nothing left to give at a certain point. And I was experiencing something that was akin to burnout, but it wasn't burnout. It was actually just a complete and total breakdown. My body was starting to just give out, and my mind was a mess. I was spinning out. My purpose, my life purpose was lost. And my doctor, my wonderful Jewish doctor, handed me a note and told me to take 3 months off of work. And my work granted me this 3 months off. And I just grabbed onto that like a lifeline. And I didn't know exactly how to rest, really truly rest. But I did find out, or rather I floated into it. There's this thing called a sensory deprivation float tank. It's a pod. Imagine a seashell-shaped pod filled with water, dense with salt, just like the Dead Sea. So you lie back and you float, and there's absolutely no effort required. That's my favorite part. No gravity pulling you down, no light, no sound, just stillness. It reminded me of the time that I did visit the Dead Sea in Israel. I didn't grow up religious. I'm from the Soviet Union, where Judaism was more of a culture than a practice. But when I floated in the Dead Sea, I felt connected to my ancestors, to something bigger, to Hashem. That same feeling came back to me in the float tank. Except this time, I didn't have to share it with 100 tourists. It was just me. At first, it was a little strange. It's total darkness and total silence. There's absolutely nowhere to hide. There's no emails, no greeting, no students needing me, just me and my thoughts. And then something miraculous happened. The tension in my body that I didn't even know was there began to release. It just started to melt away. And my mind, which was once overwhelmed, began to quiet. I floated for hours at a time, sometimes 16 hours straight. And I know what you would say, Rifki, that's pretty intense, I know. But I found worlds, inner dimensions that are undescribable. Did you know that after a few hours in total darkness, the brain starts to release DMT? It's the same chemical that's released when you're asleep or when you're dying. And the Buddhists actually have known about this for centuries. There's a sect of monks that live in caves to experience complete and total sensory deprivation in order to tap into these and unlock inner dimensions of being. And, there I was in my friend's garage float tank, unlocking those same exact doors. And what I discovered was this. Because my external world, my job, the stress, the exhaustion, wasn't the problem. It was actually my internal world. I'd been so focused on what was happening out there that I'd neglected what was happening in here. And floating taught me that my inner world is vast, it's infinite. And when I tend to that inner world, the outer world just falls in place. And floating was my renewal, my piece of the Dead Sea. And now, every time I climb into a float tank, I think of it as a mikveh. Not in the traditional sense, but a spiritual reset. A chance to let go, reconnect, and remember that my purpose does not come from what I do, but who I truly am. So if you're ever feeling lost, like I was, maybe try floating. There's a couple centers around, because sometimes the answers for what we're looking for aren't out here, but they're truly within us in the stillness, silence, and a little piece of the Dead Sea. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Zina. Dr. Ron Mitchell is a father of 5, is a physician who specializes in ear, nose, and throat disorders in children. He is the chief of the ENT department at Children's Medical Center, UT Southwestern. And Dr. Mitchell has countless moving stories from his medical career, and the one he shares with us tonight is titled Noah from Tyler. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so there is a time in every Jewish event where the doctors have to speak. So the next 2 will be the doctors speaking. So a bit about myself. I was born and spent the first few years of my life in Tiberias, Israel, surrounded by a large family and a deep with a deep sense of community. Moved to England after my bar mitzvah. I did my high school, studied medicine there. And without going into kind of a long, detailed story, I came to the US, did a fellowship, met my wife, had 5 children, 2 in England and 3 in the US. And I specialized in ear, nose, and throat. So I was told while I was sitting here a few minutes ago, what are you going to talk about? Wax or snot? I'll convince you in the next few minutes that we do a bit more than that, okay? So I am going to concentrate or kind of talk about, a child who came into my clinic who left a deep memory with me. And this is just to illustrate what do we do other than wax and snot. Yeah. So this is Noah's story, and it just kind of indicates some of the kind of joy and happiness and some of the stuff what we can do to kind of change people's lives. So Noah was 6, born and brought up in Tyler, and his pediatrician called me and said, this little child needs some help. I'm sending him to you. I'm just giving you a heads up. He has a lot of problems and his mother is very worried. So the child had obstructive sleep apnea. There must be some people in this audience who have it. But in children, it's very unusual. So this little 6-year-old cute child stopped breathing about 60 times every hour while he was asleep. So, and we call that severe sleep apnea. I'm beginning to realize why people have it on their pieces of paper, not on their phone. Okay, so when Noah came into my office, he was a cheerful, happy kid. Mom was very worried, but it was clear that this kind of lack of sleep caused his growth to be stunted. His cheeks were hollow, dark circles under his eyes, but a very happy, blonde-haired, smiley kid. And besides him stood his mother, Emma, who was very worried about things. Many, many nights where she describes she couldn't sleep because he wasn't sleeping, he was waking up, and described it as terrifying. He wakes up gasping for air, some nights are worse than others, and basically it's what I specialize in, and I said to her, I've seen this before and I will see it again, and we can work on making this little kid better. So after kind of an evaluation, the main issue with this child, which was different to other children, is he was born with what we call a craniofacial disorder, and that means that his face, his cheeks, the bones of his face were not formed in the usual normal way. So he had his tonsils and adenoids removed, which is usually the first line, but still had problems. So he still had a lot of problems during sleep. And he had what we call persistent sleep apnea, which means you've taken the tonsils out and he still has problems. A much bigger problem than the usual thing we see. So, you know, I talked to his mother, explained to her the problem. He had, as I mentioned, he had a sleep study that showed what the problem was. And I basically said that there were, you know, options to do with surgeries and some non-surgical options. But, you know, she was determined to do what was necessary. So, you know, these children are challenging. We have a team of physicians and non-physicians who deal with them, and it includes, you know, sometimes you wouldn't kind of expect, but orthodontists deal with it, dentists deal with it. We have a psychologist as part of the team. We have a social worker. You know, we look at it very holistically. Sleep medicine doctors and so on, craniofacial surgeons. So the goal is for us to see the child. Everyone gets together and comes up with a plan, and we agree the plan and we execute the plan and discuss it with the mother. And the goal is that they come in, they get seen by everyone. We go away for an hour or two and discuss the plan. We come back to the parent and say, this is what we recommend. So we started off by recommending a trial with a CPAP machine. Now again, I'm looking at a big audience. There must be someone here who uses CPAP, yeah? In children, not so easy. They're not very compliant, meaning some of them just don't tolerate it. The device is different, their nose, their mouth, and when they have problems with their kind of facial structures, it's even more difficult. But, you know, we trialed him, he got better. He slept better with this, but still a lot of problems. So the second stage of this is to start talking about surgery, which includes surgery on the jaw, surgery on the tongue, the palate, and so on. And, you know, so at a point, the day of surgery arrives, and the mother was very hesitant about surgery. We waited 6 months. But she was filled with hope, and she said, we trust the team and we think we'll have a good result. The children always surprise us. So, you know, he comes in on the day of surgery with a big smile, happy. He wants it done. He wants to feel better. He wants to be like all the other children. And the surgery was complex and involved several surgeons, and took about 3 to 4 hours. And afterwards, they generally are moved to the intensive care unit. They spend a night or two there. And usually they, you know, these children spend 3 or 4 days in hospital and then do most of their recovery at home, which in his case was in Tyler. Surgery was very straightforward for us, not for the family. In the following surgery, the transformation was incredible. You can go up to the intensive care unit and you suddenly see a child who's breathing well. They're still swelling, so the improvement continues. And in terms of, we do a sleep study afterwards, and the sleep study showed, in his case, complete resolution of his sleep apnea, which actually only happens in about 50 to 60% of these kids. But, you know, the statement at the 3-month follow-up was, I slept all night and I didn't even need a mask. So a great success. And this is just a way of illustrating some of the great contributions we can make to children as a team working together. And that's what we aim to do at Children's every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Another Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Mitchell Brooks, is an orthopedic surgeon and former family practitioner with expertise in orthopedic disorders and sports medicine. He also hosted a radio show for many years called Health of the Nation, where he focused, amongst other things, on healthcare in the United States. He is opinionated, he is funny, he is wise, he is our final storyteller this evening. Please welcome Dr. Mitchell Brooks.
Before I begin, I have to say I'm struck by all the speakers and their lives being in service to others, which I think is in essence what we are all about as a people. In the late winter of 1980, I was playing racquetball. I was in the second year of my orthopedic residency in Richmond, Virginia. And I just couldn't finish the game. I was short of breath. I felt terrible. The next day, I couldn't climb a flight of stairs. So, in the words of Madeline, something was wrong, Miss Clavel. And I went to see a friend of mine who is an internist, did an EKG, and showed that I had a heart attack. I was able to take some time off. I went home, got sick again, and on August 5th, 1980, at the age of 29, I had my first bypass surgery. That was a very interesting experience, but fast forward to July 31st, of 2007. Young man had just graduated from Texas A&M. He was working for Texas Electric. He got out of the truck. He was a supervisor. He was checking some lines, and a drunk driver drove off the road, hit him, and killed him. He had a heart that I needed. In the intervening time, I had gone through 5 open heart procedures and had every kind of cardiac procedure that you could think of. And I got a call on the 31st from my buddy, the thoracic surgeon, Michael Mack, and the next day I had a heart transplant, and that was 27 years to the day I had my first heart procedure. I thought that was quite interesting. I'm often asked, well, God, how did you get through it? And it really, honestly, for me, wasn't that difficult. I knew that there were many other things that were worse than the condition I had, and I knew that at least what I had could be treated with medication, as you've heard. And eventually, I was fortunate enough to have a device that was invented called a defibrillator. Not a pleasant experience when that goes off, but it saved my life on 4 occasions. And I had my surgery in 17 years, and 3 months later, here I am talking to you. So what did I learn? I learned that each of us has an incredible strength within us. In addition to our soul, we have an inner strength. I also learned that there are always things that are worse that can happen to you. I learned that you have to focus on a goal and believe in yourself and not let anything knock you off your path. You can get knocked down, yes, but you better get up again. I also learned, and what helped me professionally was, that it really isn't the patient that struggles with the illness, it's the family. And I think that's a lesson that's lost on a lot of physicians and surgeons, certainly not on the last speaker. But the support of a family is probably the second most critical thing to succeeding in any major surgical procedure and any major medical event in life. The most important thing is your inner strength and to believe that you will get through it. And I found that by knowing there were worse things, having the absolute faith that I would get through it, this got me through it. Did I have a religious experience? No. Did I have a godlike experience? No. But I learned that there were many, many things more important than how I felt or the condition that I had. Thank you.
Okay, well, not really going to try to sum anything up. Just want to thank our speakers for each one of them, for really going way beyond. You know, when we put this event together, we really had no idea of how it would turn out or what the turnout would be or how the presentations would be. We kind of just had faith in the human spirit and in the storytelling abilities that we all innately have. And so I want to applaud all our speakers tonight for a wonderful, wonderful job. And before we give them a small gift up here, we're going to have them all come up here in just a moment for a gift. I just want to make two announcements, three. One is just to thank you again to the Shea Family Foundation, the Scholarship and Culture Series here at Chabad. The next event, if you have your program guides in the mail, is called From Miniskirts to Hijabs. A girl in revolutionary Iran, and that's in January. That's over a Shabbat, Friday evening, January 31st, and Saturday noon, February 1st, where Jacqueline Sapir will share her first-hand experiences in Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution as a young Jewish girl. I highly encourage you all to come back at the end of January for the second installment of the Shea Scholarship Foundation series. And the other note is that we would like to do this again, perhaps in a few months. We already have the backdrop and the beautiful lettering that Shalom ordered, and so it would be a waste not to not to go for it again. And so I'm putting out an official call for stories. If you enjoyed tonight and you think you have something to share, instead of us chasing down the 10 best speakers, come and tell either myself or Rabbi Block or my mother that you have a story to share. I know we have a few in the audience already that are thinking. So that announcement will go out in due time. And thank you all for joining us in this beautiful, beautiful evening of stories. And I'd like to invite all the speakers up here to the front where we have a little gift to share with them. And we'll take a photo. If anyone, who's the photographer here? Ellie? Is Ellie? Who's the photographer?
While Ellie gets the gift, I'd like to say thank you to our sons, Rabbi Eli and Rabbi Shalom. They teamed up and they coordinated this wonderful, wonderful evening, made it all happen together. So big thank you to Rabbi Eli and Rabbi Shalom.
So why don't you all come up? And here we have, should we get rid of this? Well?
Yeah, it just has a name.
Each one has a name, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is,
Want to read it?
yeah, I'm going to read it. Mark, come over here. Let's all stand here and we'll take one picture. This is for you. Zina. Stand with us here. Aaron. Ohayon. We can give it out. Sharona. Is Sharona here?
No.
Who's left? Okay. Bernie. Mitch. Dr. Brooks. And Sharona and David Mitchell. So this book here is called One by One, Stories of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, encounters that the Rebbe had with people from across different walks of life, and the inscription reads, presented to the speaker's name in gratitude for sharing your story with the community as part of the inaugural Tales of the Tribe Storytelling Evening. May you see only God's blessing and goodness in the next chapter of your life story and appreciation. So, thank you all. Let's take one photo.
Should turn on the lights?
Turn the lights on.